Alright, so for this instance, I purchased my domain name through GoDaddy.com and I have my hosting done through InMotion Hosting. So what I need to do is I need to connect that domain name to the hosting account. It's like an address. We're pointing that address to the actual house itself. Show me where those two are connected. Now I could take a domain name and I could point it to a whole new host every couple of weeks or whatever I wanted to do. You can always move that around. It just depends on where you're pointing it to and what you use. Try that again. What you use to connect that is something called a name server. That's the name of the server basically we're pointing it over to. So when I registered for InMotion, it told me what the name servers were. So it's just two different names that I need to put in. And I have my domain name through GoDaddy. So I'm going to go into the domain names area. And I'm going to find the domain I'm looking for, which is Online Marketing Concepts. I'm going to click on that. And it's going to give me some very basic information. So here's like my contact information that's going to be thrown out to the public if I don't keep that private. Again, I didn't pay to keep that private, so I'm not too worried about that right now. And then I'm going to come over to Manage DNS. That's where I want to manage the information about my server. So I click on that, and you'll see right here at the top, Name Servers. Now it's going to give you, now if you purchase it through GoDaddy, it's going to give you two name servers by default. I think they're like, whatever, they're random name servers that are specific to GoDaddy hosting. What you'll want to do is click on Change, and probably have to change it over from default, which GoDaddy does, to custom. And then for InMotion, these are the two name servers. Usually they'll start out with like an NS or NS1, something like that, and then the name of the company. And they'll give you two of them, so I'll add those two in there and I'll hit save. I've already got those two in there right now, so I'm not too worried about that. I can just go ahead and hit cancel. You'll hit save. Every domain name host is going to be a little bit different, but for the most part, this is exactly what you're looking for. Is just find where they have the name server information, change that out, and put that in there. Now, this does take a little while to propagate, to let all the servers know that this has changed. It's not going to be instantaneous. It could take anywhere from 5 minutes to, I think they say like up to 72 hours. I've never really seen it take quite that long. At most, probably an hour or so. It just depends on everything going on with servers at the time. But for the most part, you change that out, and within a few minutes, you'll probably see your domain name up and working. That's all you need to do for that. Those are your name servers. So I'm going to come on and get out of GoDaddy, and I'm going to go to my actual domain name itself. So for this one, I had registered Online Marketing Concepts, which is a complete blank domain name. And if I type it in right now and hit return, as long as my name servers are working, you're going to see something like this where it asks you to finalize the install of WordPress. Now, if you watched the last video, you'll know that the server did all this information for me. I didn't have to do any of this. If I do it manually, this is what you have to go through. So by default, first you have to pick your language that you're going to be speaking. I'm going to stick with English because I don't know any of these other languages. And it's just saying, okay, be prepared here. You're going to need that database information that I just told you. You had to make sure you wrote down and kept safe. So I'm going to say, okay, I've got it. Well, let's go. All right, so you're just going to copy it on over. The database name I told you was the same as my username here. And in this case, I have the password just asking for here. Now the database host, for the most part, it's always going to be localhost. That's why they came in there by default. Your hosting provider, if you have a real cheap old GoDaddy hosting, I know they have some crazy long database name. Not something you'll have to really worry about for the most part if you're registering hosting accounts nowadays. But for the most part, just know that you can change it if you need to. And then the prefix for your database. Okay, so that's like all the tables are all named WP something. If you want to try to prevent being hacked, you may want to just go ahead and just change it up to something a little bit different. I'll usually just go ahead and put in like a letter and a number or something like that, just to kind of change it up, because hackers may look for WP- whatever in a database. I'm going to change it to that. Nothing affects anything that you do by doing this. Just go ahead and keep that underscore in there, and it really doesn't affect anything. Just keep it to yourself, and we'll say submit. And we're going to run the installation, and within a couple seconds here, it's going to ask me what I want to call my website. So I'm going to call this Online Marketing Concepts. Whatever. I show you how to change this later on. And you come up with a username. I'll just call it Keith. You can maybe be a little bit more creative than that. come up with something that's a little bit more secure, it doesn't matter, you can keep that one simple. But then it gives you a password that you can use. I would definitely suggest keeping something pretty complex like that and then using a program maybe like LastPass to save it, so that way you're not having to try to type all that stuff every time. We'll get into that a little bit later on as well. And I'll go ahead and put in my email address and I'll say install. Don't click on that. Yeah, for the most part, I wouldn't click on that right now. We can talk about that later. And we'll say install WordPress. So now it's doing the very final stages of installing WordPress, putting that information that I just typed in. If you had any database errors, it would have told you by now. But for the most part, that should go pretty smoothly. I'm not going to worry about that. And I'll say, okay, log in, just to make sure that this works. One thing to write down is the login page. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and I'm going to paste it in here. There are basically two locations where you can log in at. So let's go ahead and take a look at these here right now. We can go to your domain name / wp-login.php or wp-admin. I prefer that because it's shorter and it actually redirects to this top domain name up here, or actually I should say URL. But either one of those will work. So maybe go ahead and write those down if you're new to WordPress. And I'm going to put in my new username, which was Keith, and my password. And log in, and voila, I am inside of WordPress. Next video, we're going to talk about all the different things in WordPress and start to get familiar with it. All right, so we've installed our version of WordPress. We have everything up and running. This is the first page that you will see once you log in, and this is called your dashboard. So what this is basically an overview of your website as it stands right now with some basic information. I have one post, one page, one comment. These are all things that WordPress puts in by default just as kind of like placeholders for you. But as your website grows, you can get a glance, at a glance, see all the different things that make up your website. You could also do a quick draft of a post. You can look at different activities, just different news from WordPress, things like that over here. As you start to add other plugins, and you'll see when we do this, that there will be other areas that pop into here that are just kind of nice to see at a glance, but are just touch on little things with your website. So I don't spend a whole lot of time here, but being as it's the first page that you see when you log in, it is kind of important to at least understand what you're looking at. Now, the majority of what you're going to be doing is going to be involved in all the stuff over here on the left-hand side. These are your toolbars. This is your menu basically for your administrative area within the website. And this is going to let you do things like create new blog post, add media, which would be like images and photos and video and audio. Pages, these are the pages that make up your website. Now, you don't want to confuse these with blog posts, because posts are like little articles that you write. Pages are going to be like your about us or contact us, things that are more static and that don't change. The blog posts are things that continue to be added to and are more kind of newsworthy. Again, different than pages. Comments, those are nice to have. Once you start blogging, you'll see that there are probably going to be a lot of spam comments that you're going to want to watch out for. And we're going to talk through some things that will hopefully kind of minimize the amount of comments that you get that are spam, but those are where you would see new comments being placed, and you can go in and edit them and do some different things. Appearance is going to be where we're going to add different themes to our website. We're going to modify the menu. We're going to modify widgets and move things around there. I'll show you what all that stuff is. Plugins, that kind of adds the functionality to your website, which will let you do things like back up your website, add security, add social media icons, all different things like that that you can do. Those are going to be found in the plugins. Now, WordPress has a huge database of free plugins, for the most part, that you can choose from all from within your website, which is going to be very cool. We're going to take a look at that here in a little bit. The users. That's going to be either modifying your profile or adding other users to the website. What we can do is we can have other writers and contributors and editors and different people with different roles come to the website, log in, be able to do their thing without interfering with me. So you could have multiple people all working on the website at the same time. That's the true power of a CMS and working in something like WordPress. Now, if like I were in a page and someone else wanted to edit it, they would see that the page was temporarily locked until I was able to get out of the page and they could then get into it. So it has a lot of checks and functions like that that'll help prevent bad things from happening. For the most part, you really won't be using tools. There is a plugin we will install later on that will be found under tools, under the settings here that we're going to use. It's going to be helpful, but for the most part, I really don't use those. And then settings, those are what make up your website and kind of add the little minor functionality that you're going to want to set before really going too far with blogging. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to be going through all those different things, and then we're going to get into even more advanced stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the settings and take a look at what's involved in that. If I click on settings or just mouse over it, you're going to see that I have a couple different options here under the flyout that happens. And if I just click on settings, I'll go to general by default, but I can always access all of these. So I'll just click on settings. And you can see again, I'm under general by default. So when we first registered the site, you saw that I had typed in a site title, which is what this is up here. And then it gives me the option to add a subtitle or a tagline. Depends on how you want to look at it. Now, depending on the theme that you're using, it may or may not show this tagline, but you can always just type it in there. The next options you have are the WordPress address and the site address. Do not touch these. Unless you know what you're doing and you know there's a reason to edit this, do not touch this. If you wanted to add an SSL, to add some kind of encryption to your website, this is where you would go to maybe add the S within up here. But you mess with anything up here and it'll shut your website down, and you'll need to have database access to be able to fix it. So definitely stay away from that. This is the main administrator's email address. Don't really worry too much about that. The membership, anyone can register. You really don't want anybody just registering for your website unless you are maybe selling items and you want those store items to be something where somebody can register as a user so that they can retain their information. So when they come back, they can have all that shipping information already stored in the site. We'll take a look at users and where they get stored later on, but for the most part, you really don't want to allow just anybody to register for the website. So I just keep that turned off. WordPress keeps that off by default. If you do have them register, you can set what their role is by default. And we'll talk about roles as we get into users as well. But you can say as a subscriber, they're basically just allowed access to the website, not like all this back-end stuff that you're seeing. That's all administrator. But their information is then stored under users so they can be retained and used later on. So, but let's say you wanted to have a team of people. Maybe you wanted to have somebody who's just an author, maybe just someone who's just an editor or a contributor, whatever. You can give them these different roles, and it's going to give them different access to the website. Again, they may see different parts of the left-hand menu up here. Unless you're an administrator, you're not going to see plugins and appearance and different things where they can edit the site. They're pretty much going to be limited to like posts and pages and media, things like that that they can go in and edit. One important thing to change is your time zone. I like to try to find what that is because that does affect the time stamping on your blog post. Or maybe let's say you're going to have a blog post that's set to go live at a certain date and time. You want to make sure that time zone is correct if you want it to post at the right time. Now, whether or not you know your UTC number doesn't really matter. I just like to type in my city, or at least the city that's nearest to me within my state. So I'll say Detroit. And that says my time zone automatically. Now, again, I talked about the blog format where they have the timestamp on it. I can show how that displays. I can choose if I wanted to do like, the month, the day, the year, or the day, the month, the year, or have it be spelled out, or just come up with some kind of custom layout. Same thing with the time. Do I want it to be lowercase PM, uppercase PM, or do I want it to be like military time? Also, the day of the week that it starts on, I can set right here. That, again, is just kind of for blog posting, not something I really mess with too much. But for the most part, I keep all this stuff default. I just maybe change the time zone that I'm in and maybe the tagline up here. So I'll hit save. And let's go take a look at writing over here. So I've got a bunch of different categories that I went in and just edited just to kind of fill this up. By default, you're going to see uncategorized as being your main default category. These are the categories that get put into your post as you create them. So let's say I had a news website and I had a sports section, a business section, a lifestyle section. I could then decide what category those blog posts went into. And by default, maybe if I just added a new article and didn't select a category, WordPress would choose one for me by default, and that's what I would set right here. Not much you really have to do. I really don't edit this too much. Posting via email, you can actually just email a article and it would go into the website. I've never really used that. I don't know anybody who does. If it's something you wanted to, this training video is not going to show you how to do that. It's a little bit more time intensive and it's very specific to your server's information, so I really don't want to get into that one right now. Let's take a look at reading. So here's where we can say, okay, what type of website do I have? These are all things that you want to think about before we go too far with all this stuff. That's why I'm starting with settings here. Do I want my website to be primarily a blog? So when people come to the home page, they see all the different blog articles I've written, or do I want this to be more of a business page where I've got my home page, which has information, the about page, the contact page, and then blogging is kind of like a very secondary thing on the website. So if that was the case, I would say my home page is going to be a static page, and this will be the home page, and this will be where my blog posts are. For this case, I'm going to say my home page is going to be my latest blog post, so I can keep that the way it is right now. Now, this just depends on how you want to lay out your website. You can always come back and change this stuff later, but again, just stuff you want to think about before going too far. We can also say how many blog posts per page I see, and if I have maybe 20 blog posts, you'll see a little read more or like a number button at the bottom of the page after I see 10 posts to see more posts. You would see that, so I can kind of adjust that right here. Now, I did allude to when we first registered the site or set it all up, the very last option when we set our title and our username and password, the very last option looked exactly like this, right? A little checkbox, and it said discourage search engines from indexing this site. That basically tells the search engines when they come to your website, Google, Yahoo, Bing, to, you know what? I don't want you to index me right now. I don't want you to look at what I'm doing. Just go away. I'll tell you to come back some other time. That's what that checkbox is doing. It says, don't even come here. Don't look at my website. This is important if you have, maybe you're rebuilding this website for somebody else and it's an existing site. You may want to have that just turn off right now, or you just want to hide information from Google. The problem with checking that is that I usually forget to uncheck it. So if a website goes live and I realized after a month or two that, man, I'm getting no traffic, nobody's coming here, Google's not indexing me, whatever the case is. This is why, because maybe I had this checked. So unless you really need to, I wouldn't check it. But if you do want to hide the information, if this is duplicate information by, duplicating this blog and working on it on the side, you may want to check that. If you did check that initially, this is where you'd come back to uncheck it. Discussion. This is very important because this is how people comment on your website. For the most part, you can keep most of these options the way they are. You can notify me when there's a new blog link, or notify me anytime a post or a comment is made to a post, or a post is held for moderation. Those are all good to know because you want to know when somebody leaves a comment. The problem is there's a lot of spam comments out there, so you want to kind of turn some of this off. Now, you don't have to necessarily just like not have commenting, but I would definitely at least say check on this. Comment must be manually approved before it goes live. I don't want just anybody being able to post something and for it to go live to the world to see, because it could be something negative or derogatory or just spam or hateful. It could be even code injections that hackers could use. So I always want to say that I want to be able to take a look at that comment before it goes live. And we're going to see all that stuff here in a little bit. Now, we could also say, what kind of words would put a blog post into moderation. So I could type in a bunch of bad words in here, or whatever I want to say. Anytime you see this, just go ahead and hold on to that blog post or that comment. I can also blacklist people by their IP address or their email address. So if they're coming back and they're always doing bad stuff, I can just go ahead and blacklist them right here. We can also show avatars or gravitars or different types of ID characters when people do post, kind of what they show up as. So those are kind of fun, but I really don't tweak those out too much. Media. When you upload media, how does it show? These are just the default sizes for like small, medium, and large images. I really don't mess with that too much. I'll show you where that does become important later on, but just know that it's here, that you can always tweak it out for. Permalinks, that's the last big one here. By default, WordPress sets it to day and name. So let's say when I go to the website and I go see onlinemarketingconcepts.com, and then I go to a web page, it's going to show the actual date, time, and year, month, and day, and then the name of the post. That's all just excessive to me. I really don't need people to know or have in this URL appear what they're seeing. A lot of times you will see blogs with this, what they call like an ugly URL, where it's just the database information, where it's like, some database info and like the page ID. That's not real good. For good SEO, 9 times out of 10, I'll choose post name only. So like right here. So I'll see the website URL or domain name, and then the full URL is the name of that page or that post. that's so nice and clean that the search engines are immediately able to tell what that article or that page is about and index me properly. But feel free to use any of these. There's really no wrong answer, but this is probably best for SEO. Privacy is kind of a new one in WordPress where they will let you link to a privacy policy page. This is good to have. Really nothing you have to do here. I haven't never really tweaked this out. If you wanted to create your own privacy policy page, you could do that here. But that's the majority of all your settings. In the next video, we're going to take a look at posts and start to have some fun here with creating new articles, and we're going to go from there. All right, so let's jump right into posts. Posts are the articles on your site. This is all about what blogging is about, is this section right here. So over here on the left-hand side, you're going to see posts. If you want to create a new post, you come over here. If you click on post, you will see a little flyout like you do with some of these other ones. Or if you just click on post, you're going to go to all posts and you're going to see them all drop down over here. So by default, WordPress puts in a post called Hello World where there's some basic information in it, basically a placeholder, something for you to take a look at. Now spammers are looking for this page title, this post title right here. So I typically trash it pretty much right away, but we're going to use this as an example to see some of the different options for posting. All right, so let's jump right into it here. So Hello World is the title. I can either click on that or I can click on the edit to edit that post. Or if I just know I want to add a new one, I can come up here to the add new and just create a new blog post that's completely blank. But if I mouse over this, you're going to get a couple different options. I can either edit the full post, which lets me do everything. I can do quick edit, where we can take a look at, it's going to show me just some of the basic things that I can edit. I can edit the title. When it gets posted, I can give it a password, I can give it a category, some different things like that I can do. Everything basically except for editing the article itself. So that's the quick edit. Now here in a minute I will trash this, I will delete it, I'm going to put that in there. So I'm going to click on the trash here in a bit. Or if I just want to go view the post itself, like where the world would see it as opposed to me in the back end would see it, I can click on view and actually go see the post live. For right now, let's go ahead and hit edit so we can just see kind of what's going on before we get rid of this one. And you can see it gave it a title by default. So this is what the world is going to see as the title of the article. So we're going to type that in up there. And here is our editor window. This is what you're going to use to edit your article. This is very similar to like Microsoft Word, where you can go in and maybe select a little bit of text here and you can make it bold or italicized. Maybe you want to have some of this text here be a bulleted list or a numbered list, something like that. Again, very similar to Word. You should be very familiar with something like this. I can also align all my copy left, right, centered. I can select a word and I can add a link to it. I can go ahead and link that off to somewhere else if I wanted to. I can type in the URL and just hit apply. If you're not seeing all this information by default, you get one row, usually kind of by default by WordPress. If you click on this little icon right here, it gives you a second row, gives you some extra information here. So maybe I can highlight that text and I can change the color of it to be a weird green. Maybe I want to add a weird symbol, like maybe one of the letters in the Spanish alphabet or the copyright symbol. I can click on this guy right here and I can choose any of these characters. So there's a copyright. I can do that, I can indent it, I can undo some of the work that I've done so far. So it really gives you all the basic information to be able to edit your copy right in here. But this is the body of the article. This is where everything is going to go. You could also add images. You could click on this and you could start to drop in photos or video or audio or PDFs or any kind of thing that you can use for people to be able to download or see is going to go right in there. Now some other information that you're going to see right up here under the publish area, this is how the article gets published. We can either say update and go live with it, or you can say, maybe I want to say this is already published. I can click on edit. I can set this back to draft mode, so only I can see it in the back end. People on the front end of the website aren't going to see this. For right now, I'm going to keep that published. I can also change the visibility of it to be public, which is everybody. Or I can say it's password protected. So if I click on that, I can actually just add in a password, 1234, and now people have to enter that before they can read the article. So that's kind of cool. Maybe you would give maybe your dedicated members of your website, or valued readers, you can give them a password protected area to get some extra information or a download or something like that. That can be kind of nice for that, but for this case I'm just going to set that to public. I can also set this to publish in the future or in the past. I can say that I want this is today's date. I can say that, you know what, this article should actually have been live 2 days ago. Or I can say, you know what, just wait for 2 days and publish it then. So I can schedule it. But for right now, I'm good with keeping this as today's date and hit OK. And actually the date is in the future because I had my time zone incorrect in the beginning when I first did this. So I'll say OK. Now that changes it. Now it's update. So I can go live with it right now. I can also go in and change the category. So if I've got several different categories that this blog is going to go under, this post would then just fall into one or multiple categories. By default, WordPress creates this uncategorized category, which I hate. So I always get rid of that. And then I choose whichever category fits this article best. I can add some tags to it. Now these are kind of like hashtags. It's a way for people to be able to find information on your website quickly. So if you had a bunch of posts on marketing or sales or whatever the case was that was applied to certain articles, separate from the category. Maybe this was very specifically about Google marketing or whatever, so you wouldn't have a category for that, but you may have a tag for that. So there could be a place on your website where people could see all those different tags and click on those to see all the articles that have that same tag in it. Now, the last thing is a featured image. This is the large image that usually appears at the top of a blog post. So I can click on that just like I could the media area. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of set a default image that I grabbed here real quick. And I can see that just by dragging and dropping that uploaded right there. You know, it's probably too big. I still got to save that one down. All right, so I'm going to just add a featured image here. I got one on my desktop. I'm going to click and drag over to WordPress, and it's going to go ahead and upload that for me. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and upload an image. Click on the featured image. I'm going to drag it from my desktop to the image area, and I'll say set featured image, and you should see it appear right down there. So I'm going to hit update. Now what's cool is we can just click on, usually I hit Command or Control, click on the link right up here so I can go visit that article. I'm going to click on that. And you can see I've got my featured image up here. I've got my blog article down here. I've got the default comment that WordPress put into there, and I've got some widgets over here. And this is all stuff that we're going to go in and customize and kind of edit here in a little bit. Kind of ugly right now, but at the same time, we just installed WordPress and we've got a completely functioning website, styles, images, everything's super easy to do. Not a lick of code we've used so far. So a lot of potential here, a lot of cool stuff going on. We're going to get ready to go into pages next and some other cool stuff, so stick with me.